because we can't see
Okay,
panelists.
all right. What was your question? What now?
Just this.
Just a little early. It'll be all right. I'll sit all the way over here to. I'll say it.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Okay. Check 1 2. Okay.
this one on. This is a new one to me. Here? Yeah, see that one? Yes. And then you had to sit in the back. That's where we hecklers get to sit there. Well, I don't know how to, I don't either. We'll see. It doesn't look.
Shall I go get?
I don't even see it. These are too.
So then are you originally from Illinois? Okay.
I'm from Central.
Oh, okay.
Street.
No,
You from Chicago?
no.
No.
That was my first time there, actually. So I went with some of my friends, and we have
Say that again?
friends that live in Uptown.
End of these
So we
presentations, and we go into
went there for a little bit, and then like did literally every tourist thing
own
imaginable.
this process for turning on.
Very nice. What's your favorite part?
You'd just be hitting this button and hitting the screen
I
up.
just like
It turns off on it, you know.
atmosphere of the city. Like even because we were like even when we were in like the Uptown area, just like even the neighborhoods.
Okay.
It was like really neat. Otherwise, like
Good.
we did the Navy Pier.
Oh, now
the
this is
Beach
his
and the
new
Beach
windows.
Villas.
Have you used new windows?
Pizza was good.
Yes.
We did Geno's.
Good.
Okay.
Good. Well, if we get past the technical connection, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Supposed to do.
Yes.
Control, Alt, Delete.
That would be your end of things.
Hello. Derek Reed.
Ashley Raby. Nice to meet you. That's fine. cameras, so.
And then it'll be posted on the website.
Can't get to the thing.
Is this you having here by chance, or whose computer is this? It says Microsoft account, which I don't know if that's different than your KDM.
Can't get the PowerPoint first.
There's always a time. Always.
Hi, this is Mary. I need to get in touch with, David Brennan immediately. I'm over in the Union and I have to be able to sign into password and I'm not getting it. So can you track him down? He's downstairs in the meeting area. Sounds great. Thank you so much.
We just bypass this computer and use our own instead. It's right here, it's right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect.
Jeff said he wasn't here yet.
I'm gonna still put it on our desktop just because.
So, Ola, is someone reviewing the kind of this history of student support?
I was gonna mention that just sort of really quickly.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
I would say that most of them are here.
Should be good.
Where's my keyboard? I was hoping.
Is there anything else I can help you with right now?
I think that's good enough. Thank you very much.
Welcome to our town hall meeting. We're visiting today about the university's movement toward a tobacco-free environment. I wanted to give you a little bit of background about our project to move campus to a tobacco-free environment, and a little bit about the etiquette that we're going to use for the presentation today. We are doing live streaming, and we're going to record this session, and it will be on the tobacco-free website. A little bit about the etiquette is that we will save questions until after the presenters have given their information. And those who may be in our cyber audience will please key in your questions, and those will be relayed to our panel members during the question period. For those of you here in the audience that have questions, we'll have a microphone, and Maudie's in the back, she has the microphone. So in the question session, if you have questions, she'll bring the microphone. And then the presenters will repeat the question so that our folks, our viewers in the cyber audience can hear us as well. So that's just a little bit about the etiquette. I'm Olaf O'Shea from Human Resources, and I want to give you a little bit of history about the project before I introduce our august panel members. This effort really began in 2013, and it was initiated by a student question, concern about the need for restrictive smoking policy. The students at that, one of our panel members was involved in that history, did conduct a survey to ascertain student interest in this project. And the survey that was conducted demonstrated that the students were interested in pursuing a more restrictive smoking policy. The University Senate followed up with that, with a resolution indicating that they that investigation. Human Resources conducted a survey of faculty staff and found that there was support for also doing that. And that's what set us on this road back in 2013 to consider a more restrictive smoking policy. We then got a little bit of grant money, went out and got a grant and hired a consultant to give us some guidance about how to go about. There are over 1,000 universities nationwide who have moved toward a tobacco-free environment. And universities are often thought leaders in cultural change, institutions as both employers and as institutions of higher learning who are interested in trying to help culture change and our society be better overall. So we're joining the ranks of over 1,000 other universities in investigating and pursuing whether or not Lawrence should be a tobacco-free environment. Some of our colleagues are ahead of us. The Med Center is tobacco-free, as is Juniper Gardens, as is Pittsburgh State. So there are others in the state of Kansas, not just nationally, who are engaged in this endeavor. So the goal of today's meeting is just to give you some background as to the nature of some of the aspects of that cultural change, because this is very much a cultural change. It's not one of those things that you just do immediately. It's a change that takes time, and it's a kind of change that we want to engage the university community in being a part of. Not only the university community, but we are working with the Lawrence Douglas County Health Department in their Live Well Coalition as Lawrence and Douglas County investigate further developments in this area as well. So this is a national trend that we are a part of. So our focus today is on faculty and staff and to cover some of those aspects of what it takes to create this kind of a cultural change. And we thought it might be helpful in doing so to provide you some panelists who will talk about those aspects of cultural change. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our panel members. Derek Reed, immediately to my left, is an assistant professor in applied behavioral sciences, and he's going to speak to some of the social components. Ashley Harabe is a graduate student, and she's going to talk to us about the student pieces. And Jeff Severin, we hope, will join us. He's going to speak to the environmental pieces. Jeff Vitter is our provost and executive vice chancellor and will speak to the administrative components. So I've allowed each of our speakers about 10 minutes to do their presentation, and then that should leave us some time after the fact to open the floor to questions. I've given you a little bit of background here in terms of the project, our goal, having a respectful, healthy, clean, tobacco-free environment. I've mentioned some of the history in terms of how our effort began. I didn't mention the 3 campus departments that are sponsoring this activity, and that would be 4 of us actually: the Provost's Office, Human Resources, Student Health Services, and Student Rec. The grant we got was indeed from the Kansas Health Foundation, and some of our goals are mentioned in this slide. The thing I did want to emphasize is the policy is not in effect. We are in the policy formulation stage, and that's one of the reasons we're having these open forums, is to solicit input about the policy. Our goal, tentatively, is for the fall to see if the policy can be implemented by that point. That's a goal. We're not sure what the actual effective date will be, because that's a decision to be made by the provost and the chancellor as to what an effective date will be. We mentioned the website, and before the policy is formally vetted, we go through the normal policy review process, and that includes an open comment period. So this is really in the formulation stages. When that policy is finally moved through the regular policy review process. We hope that that open comment period will occur March through April, February through April really, to solicit comments. So that's kind of the process that we're using. So with that, I'm going to ask Derek to talk to us about some of the social components.
Thank you, Ola. So my responsibility here is to discuss with you some of the research on the social components related to tobacco policies on campuses. So when we consider the social aspects of cultural change, tobacco-free environment, you might want to ask, why do people engage in tobacco use to begin with? And this is an interesting question, and we know that it begins mostly in adolescence. A lot of smokers and tobacco users begin using tobacco before they set foot on a campus. So it might not make the most sense to look at why people smoke or use tobacco, but maybe look at the conditions in which they're successful in quitting. So that's the question I want to address today, is what do we know about the conditions associated with tobacco cessation? The reality is there's many reasons that people stop smoking or using tobacco. And as I explore these over the next several minutes, I'll review some representative peer-reviewed scientific literature to underscore the take-home points for you. I'll then wrap up the social aspects portion by discussing how these findings are informing our draft policy to date. So I'll begin by discussing the recent sociocultural shift in tobacco use attitudes and perceptions in the United States. So if we look at a macro level, so across the entire United States, we can see there is a shift, and we can extend these possibly to a university setting. Obviously, some aspects of national policy cannot be directly translated to a campus, but we're trying to translate as possible. So if we review information starting in the 1990s, the late 1990s, we see that there was a dramatic shift in tobacco use culture. Taxes have gone up, there's been a number of bans implemented, public policies related to this. And success is seen in major areas such as New York, where packs of cigarettes are now $14. We can see that there is a dramatic shift in people's perceptions of tobacco use as well as reception of such policies. And what we see is that as taxes are imposed and we see that these costs are levied, we see that there are bans being put in place, tobacco use becomes more of a taboo rather than a norm. And so what happens is cultural shift begins to take place. Now you'll see the sign on the board here, a public policy campaign, shame, stigma, scorn. These are things that naturally evolve. They're not programmed into policies, but that's how cultural shifts occur. So when we look at the literature, we can look at a review of smokers' motivations to quit. And what we see is that a recent review of my McCall and colleagues found that although the data consistently support the importance of health concern as the most important motivator of cessation, it is not the only reason. Social concern was the second most frequently mentioned reason. Social concern was a broad category that included various reasons such as family pressure, social pressure, effect on others, responsibility to others, and pregnancy related to raising children. So in other words, if we look at personal health aspects aside, it's the number one reason people attempt to quit, respect to keep the environment healthy, clean, and safe also emerges as the primary reason why people start to change their attitudes. So we see that respect is also occurring in respect to complying with the wishes of coworkers, children, family members. And so because this is the number one motivator besides personal health, respect should be a core component of a tobacco-free policy. Outside of our control, obviously, is prices. So we've seen this in the news, you've seen these sort of data before. A major variable in the reduction of tobacco use is levying of taxes and costs. So on the screen, you see a figure demonstrating the effects of cigarette taxes on smokers' likelihood of tobacco consumption. And you see that there is a steep decline as taxes or costs become high enough. What this means is that tobacco use is cost manipulations. Now, we are a campus. We cannot control costs of tobacco. But what we can do is manipulate cost in terms of how easy it is to access cigarettes on campus or tobacco use on campus through means such as increasing the distance to public areas where tobacco use is permitted through restrictions on campus. So cost aside, what else can predict tobacco use cessation? So to answer this question, Beiner and colleagues surveyed nearly 7,000 tobacco users, so this is a pretty sample, during a 2-year transition to tobacco use policies. This was done in Massachusetts, so it's obviously different than Kansas, but their survey findings suggest that the number one policy to complete abstinence was household bans. However, number 2 on what was most effective was workplace policies. So this implies that a campus-wide tobacco-free policy would not only limit non-users' exposure to tobacco, it may actually increase motivation to attempt complete abstinence. And this would be a very healthy and positive side effect of a policy on campus. And as discussed in the opening slides of my segment, cultural change begins to emerge even despite our programmatic efforts to incite it. So this change evolves naturally from an environment where tobacco cues are void. So you don't see people smoking, you don't see signs for tobacco use. But what do we expect in terms of a shift in culture or perceptions? So Stuber and colleagues were curious about this following the radical changes in New York City, starting in the late 1990s. And so they literally took to the streets and surveyed people in New York City, just random people, about their perception of tobacco users. And it might be hard to make out on the screen, but nearly 40% of responders indicated there is significant stigma associated with smoking or tobacco use. About 85% indicated they thought most people would not hire a smoker or tobacco user to take care of their children. 75% indicated that most non-smokers would be reluctant to date someone who smokes. So these are representative data from natural constituents out in public. And if these perceptions and cultural beliefs are in operation, and we would believe that this is evolving over time, this is in 2008, as these policies become more widespread throughout the United States, we hopefully would not want the University of Kansas to be part of this perception. So a skeptic might rightly whether these kinds of findings translate directly to campus communities, and there are, fortunately, some studies from which we can derive this information. So a recent study by Lechner and colleagues monitored smoking prevalence, attitudes, and beliefs over 4 years following a campus-wide anti-tobacco intervention in a large Midwestern university similar to KU. So what they did was, during a baseline period, they surveyed the campus community, including faculty, staff, and students. And they surveyed them on a number of aspects, which I'll review in a moment. They then surveyed over the next 3 years to see how this changed over time. So what you can see on the screen here are significant increases in the number of non-smokers and significant decreases in frequent smokers following the baseline period pre-policy. Now, it might make more sense to look at the percentages. You might not be able to see them from where you're seated. They're to the right of the red boxes to indicate the baseline rates compared to the sample. But what you see is a decrease in smoking and an increase in non-smokers. In terms of perceptions, you will see that there were significant changes in attitudes. So perceptions of smoke exposure improved. Higher numbers on this indicate no exposure perception. Beliefs that smoking or tobacco use reduces weight and indication that friends smoke while socializing significantly improved. The strengths of respondent beliefs that the campus should be smoke-free dramatically increased. And finally, the proportion of students agreeing with the tobacco ban was at 81% at the end of the 4-year intervention. Now, there's only 2 data points on here, 2009 and 2010, the last 2 years that they surveyed. And what you see is that it is on an increasing trend, and one increase in 5%. So we'd expect that over time, this increasing trend would continue to increase and level off at some point. So these data are very promising. They indicate that cultural beliefs can change quite rapidly following a tobacco-free policy. And best yet, the change in beliefs is associated with health improvements. So in sum, when we look at just some representative peer-reviewed studies, including the sample I've shared with you today, the findings suggest, with respect to the social aspects of cultural change to a tobacco-free environment, that number 1, a model policy should center on respecting others and the environment to tap into tobacco users' propensity to quit when considering the health, needs, and wishes of others. Number 2, a policy should increase the cost of smoking. Now, we can't increase the taxes, but when manipulation of these taxes are beyond our control, effort could be manipulated by requiring that tobacco use not be permitted across campus. Note, this isn't necessarily an attempt to ban personal liberties. It is merely to help promote abstinence. We're not doing carbon monoxide breath tests and punishing people who use cigarettes. We're just encouraging people not to do so on campus and hope that this will naturally transform into abstinence. And finally, the policy will change sociocultural beliefs, customs, and perceptions with tobacco use. The changes can be relatively quick, and they become stronger the longer the policy is endorsed. As the draft policy presently stands, all three of these effective social change components are accounted for, and this increases our confidence that the policy will be effective and that a strong majority of campus constituents will support the policy, especially once the policy goes into effect and they begin to benefit from the changes directly. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate your comments. Ashley Harambe has been one of the key motivating factors in this process. From the beginning, Ashley was involved in helping to get the effort started among our student population, and she has continued on in the project, moving from undergraduate to graduate status, and of course we always like our students to do that. So Ashley's going to comment to you on the kind of social, student aspects of our project.
Thank you, Ola, for the introduction. Like Ola was saying, I guess, created Help Assist like a snowball effect for this initiative here on campus. And so I wanted to cover the student aspect as well, because at the end of the day, the policy will affect anyone that steps on this campus, whether it's a visitor, one of your colleagues, one of my peers on campus. And so just to kind of go over the events that we covered this semester for you guys, we had a Great American Smokeout, which was November 20th of this year, and we partnered with the peer health educators. And so the week prior to leading up to it, we collected cigarette butts around campus, and whether it was the actual like pack litters or the actual cigarette butts, we collected them and put them in a glass case, and there'll be a picture later on in the slideshow displaying that. And we just are reaching out to all the students on campus, but we kind of took a different spin on the approach in reaching out to organizations individually and trying to hold focus groups with them and just speaking with them or doing any presentations just to kind of create a more awareness on campus, because that was one thing after speaking with my peers about it, was like creating a transparent dialogue between the entire student body, which is one thing that we've been able to establish this semester with the Student Senate. So I'm pleased with that as well. I guess different spin that we took on it. We reached out to the journalism school, and we had a few courses have class projects, and they assessed our marketing tools and feedback and some, whether it's for social media outlets as well as banners, flyers, anything to promote our initiative. And so we reached out to them, and so they provided us with great feedback for research marketing, and I was able to attend the presentations along with other members of the initiative as well. And then moving forward, obviously, we're now in the spring semester. So at the end of the day, we're just going to continue reaching out to the student organizations because we feel like that's a better approach, because you can only attract the same amount of traffic if you're on Wesco, on the library, on the library's lawns. And so by doing that, we're going to educate. That's the main thing. After speaking with my peers and speaking with faculty, staff, just like being in meetings in general, education is the main portion, whether it's through cessation services that we have here on campus or off campus, or education just the whole community in general, because KU is a very prominent location in Lawrence. And then establish an official date when the policy will become effective. Obviously, Ola mentioned the goal of the fall, but we're still like taking everyone's input into consideration, whether that's a doable goal or not. And then just continuing a dialogue with the Student Senate, because at the end of the day, they are the voice of the student body on campus. But today we're also like wanting to gain the input of faculty, staff, administrators as well, because you guys are more permanent presence on campus than the students. So I look forward to hearing your guys' opinion on the initiative as well. So thank you.
One other student activity we're engaging in this spring is some of the students from the Applied Behavioral Science program will be helping us with the, some more research and assessment. So Derek is going to help us coordinate that with those students as well. So we'll have more student classroom involvement even this spring. Jeff Severin is our Director of Sustainability, and he's going to comment to you now about some of the environmental aspects.
Good afternoon. Sorry that I'm late. I had this on my calendar for tomorrow. So I was notes in learning about the impacts on fish and other wildlife and making sure I knew my facts. But so I'm glad to be here, and I'm honored to be part of this panel. I'm really happy that the university has chosen to include some of the environmental impacts of a tobacco-free campus in this conversation. I think we also often think about the impacts of tobacco just in terms of kind of the more obvious and direct impacts on human health, but don't necessarily think about it from an environmental perspective, and also some of the kind of associated impacts on human health that are related to those environmental changes. I do want to broaden this a little bit to talk about sustainability, excuse me, and not just about the environment, but looking at this from a sustainability perspective, because that includes kind of a balance of environmental, economic, and social responsibility. So this quote here is a vision from our sustainability plan, and it was drafted in 2009 by a group of faculty, staff, and students, and then used kind of as the basis for our sustainability plan, which was completed in 2011. So we focus on sustainability in terms of protecting natural ecosystems, creating economic prosperity, and treating all people with equality and respect. And that's kind of summarized in this vision. And I think we can really tie the use of tobacco products to each of these components. I was, of course, invited to speak about the environmental aspects, and I'll kind of economic impacts both on a personal finance level and on healthcare costs to someone else. But I think talking about ties to a third part of that vision, and it's really treating all people with fairness and respect, or equality and respect. A tobacco-free campus helps address that element of the vision, because it helps create an environment in which no one on campus is disproportionately exposed to the harmful chemicals from cigarette smoke or the blight of cigarette butts that are scattered throughout the landscape. I'm not suggesting that all tobacco users are disrespectful of others in the environment, but instead that a tobacco-free campus policy is supportive of an environment that moves us toward this vision for a sustainable campus. So let's take a little bit closer look at the impacts on our natural ecosystems, starting with the most basic problem of cigarette butt litter. And this is going to seem a little strange because we're in the middle of Kansas and it's not necessarily close to a coast, but this is data from a coastal cleanups over a decade's period of time, and this is the number of cigarettes and cigarette filters that were found. And of course, as I said, it doesn't necessarily apply directly to Kansas, but cigarette butts that end up in coastal waters do come from upstream, where they make the largest percentage of litter that's collected. By some estimates, cigarette butts account for about 38% of litter that's found in the United States, and that adds up to over 150,000 tons of litter of cigarette butts each year. It does start here, and this is as kind of demonstrated by this image that was provided from a cleanup here on campus as part of the Great American Smokeout this fall. Despite providing smoking stations throughout campus and the ongoing efforts by facilities services through the landscape and maintenance crews to keep our grounds clean and well maintained, our campus landscape does remain littered with cigarette butts. Part of the problem is that butt litter tends to breed butt litter. By that I mean it becomes a social norm. So if you see litter on the ground, it's perceived as something that's okay to throw your own litter on the ground. And in fact, cigarette litter has sometimes been referred to as the last socially acceptable form of litter. you might be appalled if you were walking down the sidewalk and saw someone throw their Burger King cup on the ground, but you maybe wouldn't blink an eye if you saw that same person throw a cigarette butt on the ground. So litter is clearly a problem, but it really goes beyond just the trash on the ground to what's actually in that litter. When you think about a cigarette butt that's on the ground, what is it actually? Well, it's a filter that's made of a non-biodegradable plastic called cellulose acetate. That's what most of them are made of. And there might be a little bit of leftover tobacco that's stuck to the end. And what is that filter for? It's to keep the smoker from inhaling all the toxic chemicals in cigarette smoke. So when you find a store of cigarette litter, what you're actually looking at is a concentration of some 4,000 chemicals that someone didn't want to inhale. That includes about 165 toxic chemicals, and about 50 carcinogens. So what we've now tossed on the ground is there for someone else to deal with, and I would say that's not necessarily a shining example of respect for other people. Butts are also basically hazardous waste, and some have actually called for regulations to control cigarette butts as hazardous waste. They contain chemicals that are found in rat poison, paint thinner, fuels, explosives, and embalming fluids, just to name a few. They're chemicals that we wouldn't think about openly pouring on the ground or on our sidewalks, but exist in the cigarette butts that are carelessly tossed on the ground. Here they can leach out into the surrounding environment, get ingested by animals and other wildlife, including small children, and eventually become, these chemicals can accumulate in the tissue and work their way up through the food chain. It's been estimated that by eating these toxic snacks, over 1 million seabirds and over 100,000 mammals are poisoned and die each year. So I guess we could also look at it on the bright side. Maybe what these cigarette butts are doing is providing some new habitat for birds. This is actually a photo of an art piece that was created to demonstrate the impact of litter in our environment. But a few years ago, there was actually a study, I believe done in Mexico, of birds that were using cigarette litter to build their nests. And what they found was it was actually beneficial because all the toxins in these cigarette butts were actually killing the parasites in the nests. And so the birds that were using these nests actually survived at a higher rate when they were young, but they haven't gone back and done a study to see how, what the impact of those young birds living in a toxic environment was over time. But I just wanted to include this because it does point out kind of the toxic impact of cigarette butts to invertebrates that are near the bottom of the food chain, and therefore kind of the greater impact they can have on the local ecosystem. So as I mentioned earlier about coastal litter, cigarette butts don't just have an impact on our immediate environment, but inevitably end up downstream from where they're littered. This is a picture of how our storm drain system works. I think a lot of times we see water running down the gutters. If you're like me, you go out and build a little rock dam and see if you can build a pool and splash around in it with your kids. But then you kind of just watch it disappear into the storm drain. And we don't always think about where that goes. And as you can see from this image, which is, I think, kind of helps make that a little bit clearer, everything that goes down that storm drain eventually makes its way to a local stream. Eventually, and for us, it eventually makes its way to the Kansas River or the Wakarusa River. And those are not only sources of drinking water, but they also provide crucial habitat for aquatic wildlife. And as I was saying, what I was reviewing and have the statistics with me right now, is that those cigarette butts that end up in waterways can have an effect on Daphnia, which are sometimes called water fleas at kind of the bottom of the food chain, small fish, as well as bacteria that live in aquatic environments. So for me, I think it does come back to, and here's kind of an example. This is a photo taken along a curbside of some of the cigarette butt litter that ends up on our campus. So for me, it kind of comes back to a 3-word definition for sustainability that I came up with a few years ago when I was asked to define it in as few words as possible. And I define it as respect, responsibility, and relationships. Respect for each other and our environment, responsibility for our own actions, and an understanding and nurturing of our relationships with each other and the natural world. So unfortunately, that are associated with tobacco use on a college campus such as ours are not necessarily congruent with this definition. But by becoming a tobacco-free campus, we can start to create a campus where we have a greater respect for each other and the physical environment, both on campus and downstream. So that one where we are taking our responsibility for our actions, not littering, that we're avoiding harming each other and the environment, and that we can do it in a way that's supportive of those who need the help, of friends and other networks that can help provide those nurturing, healthy relationships essential to a sustainable campus community. So with that, I will stop and hand it over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. We now would like to hear from another Jeff Vitter, who's our Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor, who's going to speak to some of the administrative.
Let me first thank everybody for coming here today. To me, what makes a university really an exciting place to be is because we're a world of ideas. This is a place where ideas are constantly discussed and challenged. They're created here. That's all what we do in our educational system. We want students to be lifelong learners, adaptive learners, to always be questioning and coming up with new insights. And one of the things as a result is we look at issues facing society. We don't shrink away from them. This is a place to explore and probe and try to understand and always better ourselves. And this is an example, as Ola mentioned, of a realm where, starting with the student government 2 years ago, there was a great interest in looking at this opportunity to help the university community. Help in the sense that tobacco is a major cause for disease. 4,000 Kansans roughly per year die from smoking-related causes, and about 400,000 nationally. And moreover, the vast majority, almost 99% of smokers, begin by the age of 26. So university environments are key places where we can perhaps influence what is a real health issue. And it's not just how people affect their own health. Secondhand smoke is a very, very dangerous risk for other people who are not smoking. You may know that our buildings are smoke-free internally, but sometimes when you exit a building, you have to run through a smoke gauntlet, which inflicts people with very concentrated dosages of smoking. And as Jeff alluded to, this is also a matter of respect for others, but respect for the environment. So as we look at what we can do as a university, this educational process, this opportunity to discuss potential proposals and what should be in those proposals is how we can start moving forward. Ola mentioned that the medical center actually has been 100% tobacco-free since 2006. And in fact, Roy Jensen here is our director of the KU's NCI-designated cancer center, is here today and will be a resource answering questions or talking about that kind of aspect. Over 1,500 campuses nationwide are 100% smoke-free. That's almost triple from what it was 3 years ago. And over 1,000, as Ola mentioned, of universities nationwide are 100% tobacco-free, which includes, for example, chewing tobacco. So as we look at these trends, that brings up this idea of culture change. It's a migration, as we saw the data. People's attitudes are changing with the realization that health risks raise a real cost, a personal cost, of course a financial cost in terms of health insurance, and the overwhelming cost of dealing with diseases that can be prevented if we take a more proactive approach. Those costs are severe in personal as well as financial ways. So what we're here today is about culture change. This is an opportunity to ask questions, to give feedback. There will be more of these forums as we go through. This is the first. It's being taped as well so that more people can access it. And we're interested in your input as we go forward in the process. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn things back over to Ola so that we can have time for discourse and question and answer. Thank you.
So this really is your opportunity to ask any questions, and we'll also ask Mark to provide us any cyber audience. And Monty's available with the microphone for anyone who would like to ask questions or comments.
Is there a microphone?
Mark, do we have anything from our cyber audience? Not yet. Okay.
Where's the microphone?
There's one right there, Marty. Okay.
Okay, I got a couple comments and a couple questions. How come there are no working people for FS, DMC, anybody like this on this panel doing any of this work and all this kind of stuff? You know, we're the ones that are getting burned, mostly. Okay? Now, I haven't been to a building yet on this campus that doesn't have more than one entrance and exit. Why can't we make a compromise? Say this is a smoker's entrance, non-smoker's entrance. It's our right to smoke just as much as it's your right not to smoke. You know, now is this going to be a total smoke-free, or is it going to be like the alcohol sometimes ban that we have on campus? Because this is not a totally free alcohol campus. It's supposed to be, but it's not.
Okay. Questions, and if panel members want to respond, or I will respond, whichever. I think the first question I heard was, what representation does financial service, facility services have in this effort? I think I heard, why can't we do something other than tobacco-free, like different entrances? And I think I heard, is this going to be a total? Or those are the three questions?
Right.
Okay, so.
Or is it going to be like our alcohol ban that we have on campus that we don't have one?
Okay. I'm sorry, I forgot that. So, panel, I'll take a first stab and you can add to it. Does that sound all right? We have several levels of project management involved in this initiative. One of those is a stakeholder group. And that's a larger group. Whenever you do things on campus, it's always sort of a good idea to have a core group of working people who do the daily stuff, and that's what our steering committee is. There's not a facility services representative on that group. However, we do have a larger group called a stakeholder group that involves a much larger group of representatives from campus and from the community as well. We from facility services on that stakeholder group. And it's also difficult to reach everybody on campus when you're this big of a group, but we will continue to have focus groups, and one of the first focus groups we had in 2013 was we visited with the custodial staff of facility services. So we are having focus groups with workers and will continue to do so. And these town hall meetings are another way, and going to the website, making your information known. So there are several avenues for input. As to we have different entrances be smoke-free and non-smoke-free. What we have heard from other universities who have implemented such policies and from our advisor who it belongs to an organization that helps campuses make these movements, cultural changes, is if you want to be tobacco-free, you need to move in that direction and not have as many exceptions, because it is a big cultural change, and it's going to take us probably 2 or 3 years to get there. So it's a bit confusing to say you're smoke-free but not smoke-free. And yes, you're right, at present, the way the policy is drafted, we do have some exclusions. Our current policy is not totally exclusive because it does indicate that, for example, visitors on campus, we don't really have a way of enforcing something with them, but we would indicate to them that we are campus free. Right now, the student housing department has a student governing body that sets policies for student residence halls where they live. And those folks can now use e-cigarettes and chew inside the residence halls, but we have been informed by student housing that they are even reconsidering that because of the number of false fire alarms that have been set off by vaping or electronic devices. So working through those exclusions and determining whether or not we will be entirely campus smoke-free in all ways is indeed part of this process. And you're right that alcohol is allowed for tailgating, and that's the only phenomena that I know where alcohol is allowed on campus.
What about in the suite? And what about in the new park they put in Allen Fieldhouse where the rich people can go have drinks and stuff now before the game, but nobody else can smoke out there?
Well, that may be an athletics policy. You're right. And athletics is, of course, a private corporation. So, but
aren't they representing the University of Kansas?
we have.
One part of the university, you gotta make the whole.
It should be campus-wide.
And I understand that suggestion, and I appreciate your. And we do indeed have an athletics representative on our stakeholder committee, so we are talking to athletics as well. And ultimately, it will be an administrative decision as to whether or not we have any exclusions. But I certainly appreciate your input that that's an idea you would like to see.
Okay, I have another one. Vice Provost said something that you're hurting people's health, you're hurting your health. What about a common problem that is more prevalent than smoking, causes more time off work every year, causes more medical costs every year, but nobody in all of our meetings with insurance companies, meetings like this, it's never been brought up. What about weight? What are we going to do about people overweight causing our insurance to go up? Because it's been a proven fact, there's more people hurt by this than there is cigarettes. Has anybody ever thought about any kind of thing like no food, you know? People sit around all day and eat when they're supposed to be working. That's not right, people that do work all day.
I don't know if the provost, I have two comments, and I'd be glad to have Jeff supplement that. We do have an employee assistance program, and part of the employee assistance program for faculty and staff does include activities for weight loss and weight management. So that is something that the faculty and staff can take advantage of. Likewise, our student health services provide services in that regard in terms of weight and health management. And then the other comment I would make is I did read a report from the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, and they indicated that the state of Kansas is indeed falling in its national rankings in terms of healthy states, and the primary reasons for that decline are obesity and adult smoking. So while obesity is certainly a problem, so is adult smoking. So maybe we need to pass the microphone on to share some time with some others.
Yeah, let me just comment that you addressed issues of alcohol and obesity. Those are certainly health risks, and we try to promote health and education so that people can make good choices in their personal lives. I don't want to derail a good cause because there are other issues that you may want to consider or not consider. We're really here to talk about smoking and tobacco-free or smoke-free campuses and the relative merits of doing that, advantages to the environment, to one another, as well as to yourselves for having that kind of approach. So, some of these other issues are certainly worth talking about or thinking about, and we try to promote health and help people deal with issues as they arise. But here we're talking about tobacco and smoking and what we can do to promote health for ourselves, for others, and for our environment.
See, that's a bad thing about asking all the questions, because she tells you what she wants to hear. Every time.
No,
I'm
that's
afraid-
my wife you're talking about.
gonna
She
say.
tells me what.
Okay, there's another question in the back.
I'm Jane Hoyt, and I work in the libraries. I have never smoked, but I have some questions about this. One of them is about the underlying attitude, which seems to me to be rather self-righteous. I believe all of us have in our lifetime done something that isn't particularly healthy. So then I would like to go to the question of, there was a quote, treating all people with equality and respect. Well, my question is, two questions. One is, we have an excellent engineering department, we have an excellent architecture department. Why cannot they be employed to devise some way for smokers to smoke on campus in areas that are moderately convenient and that do not disturb other people? I mean, I think that's a perfectly realistic assignment. So then, my other question is, since the goal is to treat everyone with respect, how would the administration and KU be treating the smokers with respect? So those are my questions.
I'd be glad to open that to the panel, or if you want me to take first, whatever your choice is here. One of the, okay. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Roy Jensen. I'm the director of the Cancer Center at the University of Kansas. And in terms of, I'm not sure where she went. There she is. Addressing that issue. So for many years, there were policies, both in restaurants and in airplanes, which attempted to basically segregate smokers from people that chose not to smoke. Anyone who was on any of those flights and anyone who ever had a meal in one of those restaurants knows that it is basically impossible without having two hermetically sealed environments to prevent cigarette smoke from wafting to the non-smoking area.
And I'm suggesting sealed environments.
Well, not practical, okay? If you look at the health cost right now of each pack of cigarettes sold in the state of Kansas, it's $11.66 come back to the state. And where that comes from is if you add up the illnesses, the cost to treat illnesses, the lost productivity, and everything else that is entailed from people smoking cigarettes, and you divide that by the number of packs sold, it costs the state $11.66 per pack of cigarettes. This university should be about leading. It should be about promoting healthy environments and making sure that this state positions itself as best as we possibly can to have our citizens be healthy and to have a strong economy, and a big part of that is having a healthy population. Smoking is the leading cause of preventable death. It's the leading cause of preventable illness. And taking a stand against that, I think, is a critical part in having a great university.
There again, you're talking about two enclosed areas, not outside. Yeah, outside air. Really not apples to apples.
It is almost, well, people brought up,
How about car fumes?
I'll ask questions one at a time. So people compared the use of alcohol to smoking. It is possible to use alcohol and not impact the health of individuals immediately in your vicinity, impacting your health. It is not possible to have an individual smoke a cigarette or cigar and not impact directly people's health in the immediately adjacent area. That's not possible.
But we're talking about outside.
And I'm talking about outside as well.
We're not talking about alcohol right now, we're talking about smoking.
Right. And when you have these clustered environments where you have people smoking, you concentrate the smoke at the doorways of the buildings, and it is not healthy. Secondhand smoke is a cause of cancer. 11% of lung cancers are in people that don't smoke.
How many people die of lung cancer that don't smoke?
I just said there's about 140,000 lung cancer deaths a year, and 11 to 12% of those are in people that don't smoke.
I have a question. I don't need that microphone. If KU is wanting to start this by spring of 2015, which is August, I've been smoking for 43 years. How am I going to stop between now and August?
The question for the cyber audience was that he's been smoking for 43 years, and how's he going to stop if the policy is implemented in August? The policy doesn't require you to stop smoking.
I work here for 8 hours a day. I can't go 8 hours a day without smoking.
His follow-up comment is he can't go 8 hours a day without smoking. The university does provide cessation support if you want to do that. One of the things that we will look at in the policy, as we've already indicated, is whether or not do there need to be designated smoking areas. I can tell you what a lot of the other universities do. A lot of other universities that have these policies allow smoking in private cars. Whether or not that would be an option that would be available on our campus, we haven't gotten that far yet, but that could also be another alternative.
One other comment. I went to Oklahoma State, which is a tobacco-free university. But if you go right off the state line, all the way around that campus, all you see is cigarette butts. Because they know right where the boundary is, so they go to that other boundary. And there's lines of cigarette butts all the way around the university. And I don't see how that's environmentally friendly.
The comment is that he's visited Oklahoma State, which is tobacco-free, and gone to the perimeters of campus and find cigarette butts around the perimeter of campus, which doesn't seem to be environmentally sustainable. I can, again, only speak to you about experience that we've heard from other universities and what they've been, and one of the things that's on our horizon that we want to do. We plan to have meetings with the neighborhood associations that border on campus to let them know that we are considering this policy. For those universities that we've heard about who have these policies, that is a consideration that you have to make. And what they did in some of those universities was had a reporting mechanism for the neighborhood so that they knew who at the university they could contact if that kind of debris became problematic. And then some of the universities had special projects on a periodic basis where they would go around to the neighborhoods and pick up the debris. So all I can give you is a couple of ideas that other universities have used to address this issue, and we do plan in our project to meet with neighborhood associations to get some feedback from them. One from the cyber audience.
Ola, there is a question about whether the ban would be extended to Potter Lake and Marvin Grove. Can you talk a little bit about whether the current policy is from border to border of campus, West Campus, main campus?
The way the policy draft for discussion is currently written is it would include those properties because they are properties owned by the university.
Hi, Karen Rush, Facility Services. I'm reading and I keep hearing that this is to be a tobacco-free initiative, but then I keep hearing the smoking thing thrown in there. You did bring up e-cigarettes, so that's really where my question is. It's not smoking, it's not tobacco, so are e-cigarettes excluded from this ban, or will they be allowed?
As currently written in the draft policy, they are excluded, as are all other forms of tobacco. The research is, and perhaps our friend from the Cancer Center could give us some information there, but the research is just beginning to come out now about e-cigarettes. It's basically still an unregulated area, so you can get a lot of very interesting chemical combinations in e-cigarettes. The research is just beginning on whether or not they are effective for all people as devices for discontinuing smoking. They are for some, but so far the preliminary research, and I'm not an expert here, it's just what I've read a little bit of, are not conclusive as to whether or not they're successful for all people. And so as currently written, e-cigarettes would be excluded. I don't know if our friend from the Cancer Center has any information on e-cigarettes.
So the tobacco part of it would include tobacco, though?
That is correct.
Dip or chew, however you want to put it.
That is correct.
Along with cigarettes?
That's correct.
But not
and
the e-cigarette?
It would also include e-cigarettes.
Oh, this ban will?
Yes.
Is there, I mean, to allow students to use the buildings but not the staff outside?
As I mentioned to you earlier on, student housing is currently reconsidering whether or not they are going to continue to allow students to use e-cigarettes in residence halls. There have been 14 fire alarms that have been set off in residence halls by the vaping devices that students are using. It's beginning to be a bit costly for the university. So even student housing and their student board, a student-driven board, is reconsidering whether or not they will continue to allow e-cigarettes for students in the residence halls. At present, they do.
So earlier there was a slide in the presentation which asked the question somewhat rhetorically, why do people smoke? I can answer that question pretty definitively. It's because of nicotine. Smoking and e-cigarettes and various other uses of tobacco are basically a delivery mechanism for nicotine. And nicotine is an extraordinarily powerful addictive drug, and many authorities believe that it may be the most powerfully addicting drug that we've ever encountered. And they include crack cocaine and methamphetamine and a whole bunch of other things along with that. So that's why people smoke. When you, e-cigarettes or vaping or whatever you would like to call it, basically is a massive uncontrolled experiment on our population to see whether or not if you give nicotine in isolation, whether or not that has health impacts or not. We don't know a lot about the long-term effects of this. One of the problems is that in many cases, you're not just using pure nicotine in these delivery devices. They come with flavors, they come with all sorts of other types of chemical mixtures in them, and we simply don't know the effects of mixing all of these things and igniting them. So the other thing which was mentioned and is absolutely spot on is when they were brought out, in fact they were invented in China as a way to get people to quit using cigarettes. And the hope was that we'd be able to wean people off cigarettes because of the known carcinogens and all of that, and get them onto e-cigarettes. What's been shown is that in large part they've become a gateway mechanism for people to start using cigarettes, because you can still get addicted to nicotine, and young kids in particular quickly figure out that cigarettes are a much cheaper delivery vehicle than any of the e-cigarettes out on the market. And so they can get their nicotine hit in a cheaper way by just using cigarettes. So I think, many people are including e-cigarettes in their tobacco bans. The nicotine is still derived from tobacco, so it is a tobacco product. And the early research would suggest that while they're probably less harmful than cigarettes, we don't know enough about them to encourage adoption of their use.
Speaking of being respectful, it's now 2:00, and there may be others who want this room. So I'm sorry to cut off the conversation. We will continue to have town hall meetings. The email addresses, website addresses you see up here do give you the opportunity to provide feedback by email, and we'll continue to have focus groups and town hall meetings around campus. Thank you very much for your input and ideas. We appreciate it, and we'll continue to visit about this initiative as it moves forward. Thanks.